Welcome back to Department 1. People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. Chesnoff and Mr. DeGuerin. We have Mr. Lewin, Mr. Milius, Mr. Balian, and Mr. Henderson. For the people, our jurors and alternates all are present. Welcome back. All right, we were, when we left off, in the midst of a conditional, the tape of a conditional examination, right? Is that where we're starting off again?
Yes, sir.
Lisa DePaulo.
On the issue of the Fridays.
Oh, so I will talk to jurors about that.
Okay.
Let me chat with you a little bit more about the schedule.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So what we're alluding to, and we'll talk a little bit later, is that we've always contemplated that we'd have Fridays off during the trial, and that during deliberations you'd work through. So we'll almost certainly be in deliberations on August 27, right? We'll possibly be in deliberations as early as the 20th. So I want you to start thinking about those days and thinking about your schedules. I'd earlier stated we would be dark on the 18th of August. And we will be dark in the afternoon for sure, but we may be able to use that morning also. We're fine-tuning the schedule, but we did want you to be aware of those towards the end of the month, those Fridays. So we'll chat a little bit more in detail after I speak with the lawyers a little bit more. So with that, let's resume the conditional examination of Lisa DePaulo.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to begin at 1 hour and 7 minutes, 41 seconds, where we left off last.
Have you ever heard of what I'm going to call the cadaver note?
Yes.
And you understand that to be a letter that was sent to the Beverly Hills Police Department with the word Beverly misspelled wrong in relation to Susan Berman's murder, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you tell me, did you ever see either that letter or a copy of it?
I was provided a copy of it.
And who provided you that copy?
I've already told you this, and I feel like I can't pass that on again. Janine.
And when Janine Pirro provided it to you, did she provide it to you at that time in a public manner where you could attribute it to her?
No, there were conditions.
And is it fair to say that over time you decided that you were willing to reveal where that information had come from, despite whatever conditions Ms. Pirro had attached?
Yes.
And in fact, you ended up, when I asked you, telling me in a tape conversation, correct?
Yes.
When I interviewed you with detectives, did I make clear to you that I was taping?
Always.
I want to ask you, when I say the name Cody Caslis, do you know who that is?
Yes.
And who is Cody Caslis?
He was a detective with the Galveston Police Department who was the cop who got the case, basically, in Morris Block.
He was basically the lead investigator, one in the Morris Block case.
Correct.
Did you ever meet Detective Caslis?
Many times.
And that's C-A-Z-A-L-A-S, first name C-O-D-Y. Did Cody Caslis ever provide materials or leak information to you?
Not during the investigation, not prior to Galveston. The Galveston trial.
Not prior to, I'm sorry?
The Galveston trial.
After the Galveston trial, at any point in time, did Mr. Caslis provide materials or information to you?
Yes.
At some point, did you become aware that Cody Caslis and Janine Pirro had a romantic relationship?
Yes.
And how did you find out this information?
Originally from Janine Pirro.
And did you inquire Janine Pirro when that relationship started?
I most definitely asked her.
And what did she tell you?
She was vague.
She was vague. Did you ever ask Cody Caslis about the relationship with Jeannie Pirro?
No,
At a certain point, after charges were filed in this case, were you approached by Jeannie Pirro?
did you make that more clear?
So, at a certain point in time, after we filed charges in 2015, were you approached by Jeannie Pirro with a proposition?
Yes, yes, yes.
And can you please explain what that was?
To be a co-writer of a book she has sold from
And is that what it?
sold for in advance. To co-write a book on her search for justice in the Durst matters.
Did that book end up being published?
Yes,
Did you end up being a co-writer on it?
no,
What happened?
a lot of things, but most relevant, I believe, I came to believe that things she wanted me to put in the book were not true.
This was occurring in 2015, is that correct?
Yes,
During that time, were you personally aware as to whether or not Detective Caslis and Jeannie Pirro were still engaged in a romantic relationship?
very much so.
And how do you know?
Because I moved into her house to get the book done as quickly as possible, and he would come to visit.
And did you actually be present when he would stay there?
Oh, yes,
Was he staying in his own room?
no,
Who was in the room with him?
I guess she wanted it was her room.
Did you ever discuss with either one of them at this time their relationship?
I discussed it with her.
And did she acknowledge that she and Detective Caslis had this romantic relationship?
Oh, yes,
Did you do a Dateline episode in 2002? Do you recall?
yes,
During that episode, did you tell Dateline that Susan Berman told a mutual friend of she and Bob Durst, "We love him and we can't bring Kathy back"?
yes, that sounds like
And who were you referring to, that unnamed person?
Mr. Cheney.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
We cross the pen, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Where are we going?
He's gonna cross the table.
Good afternoon.
Correct, Chief.
My name is David Chestnut, and I'm one of Durst lawyers. So at the time that Ms. Pirro provided you with the cadaver note, it was a piece of evidence from the investigation of Ms. Berman's murder. Is that correct?
Correct.
And she was the chief law enforcement person in Westchester County at the time as a district attorney?
Yes,
So you had a source that was providing you with material from the investigation that was a high-ranking law enforcement person supposedly interested in pursuing an investigation, correct? She gave you a copy of something that was part of a criminal investigation, correct? Is that, I couldn't hear you.
correct, Mr.
Thank you.
Chestnut.
And in your job as a journalist who explores crime stories, you are trying to get as much information as you can from sources, correct?
Correct.
Most times, like with someone like Detective Cesara, they respect the law enforcement privilege and don't provide you with material as part of an active investigation, correct?
In my experience, yes.
Okay, but Ms. Pirro thought it was okay to do that and gave it to you, correct?
I don't know what she thought.
But she gave it to you. Yes?
Yes,
Thank you. Now, The detective that you mentioned, Cody, how do you say his last name?
I think it's Gonzalez.
Okay. Did
Maybe
Miss
Catalyst, I think it's Gonzalez.
Did Miss Pirro have a picture of him in her house when you stayed there?
She did.
And would she have that picture prominently displayed when he wasn't there?
No, it was in a drawer.
And when she heard Cody was coming, she'd take the picture and put it out, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was for Cody's benefit more than it was for hers. Is that fair? Pirro, in a sworn affidavit, said she selected you to be her collaborator on the book, and at the time, you were having difficulty finding work and paying your bills. Is that true?
Nothing could be further from the truth.
This is a declaration that Ms. Pirro made under oath, correct?
In an affidavit,
She stated you'd never written a book before. Was that accurate?
I read ebooks, so not.
How many
I
books?
wrote an ebook, so not entirely.
Okay. She says you were abusive when you lived with her, you were chain smoking, you were drinking excessively, and refusing to clean up after yourself and your dogs. She said all of that, correct?
She certainly did.
And is that true or not true?
It is not true.
So Ms. Pirro, according to you, lied under oath, correct?
Correct.
She says you were popping pills and were mixing it with alcohol. Is that true?
No, sir.
She says you were stumbling regularly. Was that true?
No, sir.
She said your hands were shaking constantly. Is that true?
No, sir.
She said you fell asleep during work sessions. Is that true?
No, sir.
She said you never helped her write the outline for her book. Is that true?
No.
The biggest problem you had, according to your version of events, is that Miss Pirro wanted to put things in her book that just weren't true, correct?
Absolutely correct.
She wanted to put things that would affect the story about Mr. Durst that weren't true, correct?
Correct.
She, you've been doing this for a long time, for very respected publications, and one of the things that you try to do is acquire things that are corroboration, correct? Of facts. So if a witness tells you something, if you can get a receipt to back up their story, you try to do that, correct? At any time that you were working on this book project for Miss Pirro, or any time you were working on any of these stories about Mr. Durst, going back to Talk Magazine or New York Magazine, did anybody from the Westchester County law enforcement ever provide you with a single piece of paper or receipt showing that they had visited Miss Berman prior to her death?
No.
Did anybody ever show you a receipt for an airplane ticket to California that showed they visited California before she passed away?
No, no.
Did they ever show you any phone records from the Westchester County Police, the District Attorney's Office, anywhere, cell phone, if they, yeah, they existed then, showing that anybody from law enforcement had ever been in contact with Miss Berman prior to her death?
No, I could find out evidence. No.
And in spite of that, Miss Pirro wanted to insist that they had been there before she died, correct?
But they had made contact.
Okay, but you had seen no evidence of any contact whatsoever.
No.
And you confronted her with that, correct?
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons you guys, I'm sorry, not only you guys,
Okay.
you folks had a dispute, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
That's a yes.
Thank you. By the way, she claims that the reason you were having trouble focusing on the book was you were in a fight with your former employee and your landlord at the time. Was any of that true?
No, I had a former employee and a former landlord.
Okay. Now, here's one that caught my attention. She says her associates were afraid for her safety from you. Did you ever at any time do anything to threaten Ms. Pirro's safety?
No, it's not even regret.
That's great. She said that you would continually, well, I shouldn't use that word, she didn't say that. She says you yelled irrationally at people that were her guests in her home. Is that true?
No. Most of the time. No, it's a little bit.
Now, in February of 2002, you authored an article, I believe it was in Talk magazine, entitled "The Devil and Bobby Durst." Is that correct?
The title, I believe, was what made Bobby run, but the cover line might have been Devil and Bobby Durst. There was the title.
I see. What made Bobby run? But on the front it says "The Devil and Bobby
Yeah,
Durst."
that's the cover.
Okay. You wrote at page 99 of that article, Berman's line on Bobby was that he had not killed Kathy. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. A great many of her friends from the past 2 decades recall her being totally unwavering in her support of Durst and totally, and the word you used was dismissive of the murder theory. Remember that?
Yes.
Who were the people who told you that?
If I didn't name them by name in telling that anecdote, then that was off the record, or not for attribution.
But now we're in 2018, you're in court under oath, and you've been called by the state to answer questions. So please tell me, who were the people that told you that?
Mr. Chesnut, I would have to look at which specific sources they are and see if there are any of the 3 that I
Okay.
have permission to.
Before you came to testify, did you review your notes from over the years as it applied to your work on Mr. Durst?
Most of it.
Okay.
So you did provide some documents to Mr. Millen, the documents that you requested?
Yes.
Okay, so
When you,
It's up to his honor, I mean.
Can I clarify something?
clarify the answer that you previously gave.
Well, this is question, and then this.
Okay, perhaps you misunderstood this question when you answered it. You may amplify upon your answer. Yeah.
Thank you. When you say review,
Don't ask him a question, but you may give your answer.
what I heard was, did you review your notes and things before you got here?
I have hundreds of pages, probably thousands.
Okay.
But I did not, what I mostly reviewed, what I was reading was the 2 articles that I read that were in the public record, and the interviews that I had turned over to both Mr. William and you, which you did the same thing. That's what I reviewed. I didn't review, that's why I don't have the answer to who those sources are, because I didn't read.
During the course of your work as a journalist and author, with respect to the subject of Mr. Durst, you have interviewed multiple people, correct?
Correct.
People made statements that were exculpatory
And
and
those-
favorable to Bob, correct?
Yes, and I included those on the record, statements from people saying that.
Well,
Both in my article.
Okay. Let me ask you this. I think we may be back tomorrow. Would you be kind enough, I'm sorry,
That's okay, I just missed my dog.
sorry,
I missed my dog.
ma'am, would you take the time this evening to review your talk
Absolutely.
article and
Yes.
examine who you refer to as sources, and then tomorrow we can talk about whether you feel comfortable revealing who they are.
They certainly do.
Can you give me a copy, Sean?
We'll adjourn for the day. In order to return tomorrow and not discuss your testimony with any other witness, the department that you want to do. 10 o'clock. Good morning, Mr. Paulo. Mr. Paulo, as resume the witness stand, I'll remind you that you're under oath. And you may continue with your cross-examination, Mr. Chestnut.
Mr. Paulo, after court yesterday, we had an opportunity to visit, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And during that conversation, I referred you to the portions of your article in Talk magazine that referred to various sources. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And then you informed myself as well as the prosecution that based on your understanding of the journalist privilege, at this time you would decline to reveal those sources, correct?
Yes.
And let me ask you this, before you met with Mr. Lewin to prepare for your interviews, did you review the notes that related to the unnamed sources?
Before,
You met with Mr. Lewin and he, or spoke to him on the phone and he taped
I
recorded?
think so. I mean, I remembered certain things that were obviously more important than other things.
Okay. But did you take the time to review your notes, your transcriptions, like the ones that Mr. Lewin had you read from the court yesterday?
Not before we spoke.
You have a complete set of transcriptions, correct?
Right.
The tapes may be missing, but you actually have the transcripts.
Oh,
Okay. And would it be fair to say that the people who you are not disclosing would be considered people that had information regarding the Durst investigation, correct?
anyone I spoke to had information.
Well, some of these people were referred to in your article as being the friends of Susan, were telling you that Susan was unwavering in her support of Bob. Is that correct?
Some, yes. And
And that Susan was totally dismissive of the theory that Bob had anything to do with Catherine's disappearance, correct?
yes, but. I
Well,
know you're like, yes, but. She also privately told different people different things.
okay, I understand that. Mr. Lewin's free to ask you about that, but there is no question that among the unnamed sources that you will not reveal are people who referred to Susan's unwavering support and belief, representing belief that Bob was not involved in Catherine's disappearance, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to ask you again for the record, would you please tell me the names of those people?
No, and I can tell you why.
Excuse me?
No, but I'll tell you why.
Well, oh, you can make a record, oh, sure.
Okay, tell me.
Because I feel like we're going down a slippery slope now.
Excuse
I
me?
feel like we're going down a slippery slope now. I gave you guys, and I mean, you guys know anything I gave to Mr. Lewin, I was also giving to you as it should be. What I was very comfortable with, based on all the things we spoke about yesterday. But now, it's like, well, who are the sources in these books? And then the tomorrow will be, what about this paragraph? And then if I give you notes, it's going to be, oh, why did you use this? Or, and so no.
Couldn't you solve that by just giving everything? Then you wouldn't have to worry about picking and choosing, correct?
I'm not comfortable doing that.
Okay, but would you agree with me that you've taken a position when you were writing these articles
Mhm.
as trying to show that Mr. Durst was involved in criminal conduct?
No,
Well, every article you wrote suggested that he was responsible for Kathy's disappearance, correct?
I don't know if you recall the first article.
In the Talk magazine article, remembering that you are in a court of law, would it be a fair statement to say that your article suggested that Mr. Durst was responsible for Kathy's disappearance, correct?
It would be a fair statement to say that what my reporting turned up was that lady.
And you've revealed sources of people who have said things that are negative for Mr. Durst, correct? Like Mr. Chavin or Mrs. Chavin, correct?
Not in the article.
No, but presently.
Correct, correct.
Okay. And the people that I'm asking you about have information that's favorable to Mr. Durst, correct?
Mr. Chestnut, I think I want to explain one thing. I'm a magazine reporter. We don't necessarily attribute every quote or quotelet, is what I call some of this. It's, of course we have to be certain and, that it's a solid source. And these things are vetted not only by editors, but by lawyers. But I don't, when there's a bunch of things that are similar I don't necessarily put a name on every single quote left.
Thank you. Is it fair to say that you have unnamed sources who told you that Susan said she did not believe that Bob had anything to do with Catherine's disappearance, correct?
Yes, but
Okay. Now, next question.
Wait, Your Honor, I think the witness,
But
if I can finish, Your Honor, when the witness, to answer the question fully, when the witness says yes, but, she needs to be entitled to answer what the rest of that but is.
So what is the reason why?
first, when you read this paragraph yesterday, you left out the last line, which was, that it was always poor Bobby being unfairly targeted, says one friend. It would not be until after her death that friends would remember more. And the point.
Yes, but your point.
Yes, and, it doesn't, this is one paragraph. The rest of the story goes into great detail of things that Susan said that were different than, poor Bobby. So you're taking this one paragraph out and it's just not representative.
All right.
And my reasons for not quoting every single quote I read is it's a drag for the reader.
Right, so it's a stylistic
Correct.
choice.
Correct.
Next question, are any of those statements that you're not, so are there sources who required or demanded confidentiality? Or is it simply a matter of just the principle of turning over notes, which is both are recognized?
It's pretty much principle, and, I'm sure if I called the 3 or 4 people voted in little snippets in that paragraph, I don't know the answer to you, I'm guessing they'd have no problem, but then I said it, that's a slippery slope. Then, Mr. Chesnoff can say, and what about this paragraph? And I'm uncomfortable going down that road.
you would agree with me that there are two sides to this story, correct?
Of course,
Okay, that's why we're in court, correct?
absolutely.
So you also understand that it's important that Mr. Durst be provided with information that doesn't just support the prosecution side of the story, but information that could assist him in his defense, correct?
But I don't work for you.
You work, well, as a witness, you work for the court, you'll agree with that, right?
Correct.
In your article in Talk, one of your sources was Miss Pura, correct? And,
Yes, please say
that
yes.
is,
Yes.
and you said in your story that she was fixated on Durst when you wrote the story in Talk magazine. Remember saying that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, but that wasn't really the case, was it?
She was fixated at that time.
At that time?
At that time.
Okay, when was that time then? What time period are you talking about?
Between the murder of Morris Black and my story.
Okay. But not contemporaneous. So what would those dates be?
I believe Morris was found at the end of September, in September 2011, not one after another.
Okay, but not back in the time frame of Ms. Berman's death, right? She wasn't fixated then.
I wouldn't call her fixated then.
In fact, you said that much of what she claimed to have been trying to do with respect to Ms. Berman was not true, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I think the witness said not long, she said 2011, but said not long after 9/11. I think she meant 2001.
I think she
Just so the
meant
record
2001.
is clear, Your Honor. I think she said 2011.
Did you misspeak?
I misspoke. I said 2001.
Thank you.
Another person that you relied upon in your, one of your sources was Gilbertine Johnny, is that right?
Yes.
And when you relied on her as a source, she was somebody whose information you reported to your readers, correct?
Yes, after
And
confirming it.
you subsequently came to the conclusion that she was not the most reliable of sources, did you not?
I did.
In fact, you think she was prone to exaggeration, correct?
I think Gilbert had some issues.
She made up stories about seeing people and spending time with people that she really wasn't friends with. Is that right?
I don't remember that specifically.
I apologize. I can't remember what I asked you because of
I think you were asking me if I came to doubt someone.
Yes.
Gilbert's
yes.
story.
And who were, she would claim to know, spend time with people you found out she didn't really spend time with. Is that correct?
There were different things, but when you do get a source that tells you things, you try to independently verify as much as you can.
One of the ways you did that was to have police people corroborate things, correct? Like I think, sorry?
I often would say to law enforcement, can you confirm or deny this, this, and this? Sometimes they wouldn't.
But sometimes they would, right?
No,
Okay, well, you told us yesterday about how Ms. Puro leaked the cadaver, copy of the cadaver to you, correct?
Yes?
Yes?
yes, I'm sorry, yes.
And I think it was on direct, or maybe from one of your interviews, you were very careful to say that Detective Becerra did not leak to you, correct?
Yes, you never gave me documents.
Right, but he did corroborate, you'd have corroborate facts that you were investigating, correct?
What I recall is that there were certain facts about his investigation into Kathy's disappearance that I asked him in private. Is it true that you interviewed, for example, is it true that you interviewed Gilbert in the jail? Is it true that you drenched the lake or didn't drench the lake? Or like things like that.
So he was like a fact checker for you.
No, as reporters, you try to get sources to corroborate information you have.
And he would do that for you, correct?
Sometimes, and sometimes others would.
Did he ever tell you, so when he did that, he didn't say to you, you know what, this is a police investigation, I can't talk to you about it, did he?
He never, to my recollection, gave me information from the police investigation. What I was trying to do,
Where else would he have the facts from? That wasn't from the police investigation.
Sir, what I was trying to do, and sometimes you succeed and sometimes you don't, is have someone with knowledge to confirm or deny things before I went to print.
Right.
And that is partly how I became to have some red flags about this and agenda.
But, in fact, the only way he could confirm something was his knowledge from his police work, correct? He didn't just pull it out of the sky, did he?
I just think that's an unfair question.
Well, that's fine, but answer.
You referred earlier to a journalist doing her best to cops. You weren't talking about me, were you?
Yeah, it was actually.
You were?
Would you please answer my question?
Which one?
The one that you just said you don't want to answer.
No, you.
Ask it again, please.
The only way Mr. Becerra could have verified or corroborated information that you asked him about was from information he learned as a result of his work as a policeman, correct?
I suppose. I
Well,
mean,
you weren't going to him because he was the janitor at the local high school and you wanted to get a source. You were going to him for corroboration because he was a policeman.
like every reporter does. You go and say, can you confirm or deny this?
Correct. So he gave you information from his police investigations, correct?
He would confirm or deny it at times.
Did Ms. Puro, when you were working with her, ever disclose to you what the secret information she purportedly found when they searched the South Salem home that you referred to in your article?
I don't know.
Who was Mr.?
Mr. Margulies was Susan's husband.
And she was married to him for a short period of time, is that right?
Correct.
And when he passed away, I believe, of a drug overdose, is that correct?
That's what I was told.
And in the course of your work, you were told by people that Mr. Durst was a big supporter of hers in the aftermath of her husband's death, correct?
Yes,
And he was like a rock to her, was he not?
that's what I was told by my sources.
Now, she had another significant other, a fellow named Kaufman, correct?
Yes,
And in the course of your investigation, you discovered that Mr. Kaufman had wrought economic havoc on Miss Berman. Is that true?
that's correct.
He basically busted her out, didn't he?
Right. That's your term,
Okay, I'm from Vegas, so I'm sorry. That's a Vegas term. He basically used her money, blew it, and left her holding the bag, so to speak, correct?
We understand it. He encouraged her to be involved in a deal that was.
Ma'am, on direct examination, Mr. Lewin asked you about your interaction with Ms. Pirro, correct?
Correct.
During the course of your interaction with Ms. Pirro, did you have a time where you spoke to her about Deborah Charney?
Yes,
And had you previously spoken to Ms. Pirro about Deborah Charney in the past, in the 90s, for example?
I didn't meet her until 1999.
Right?
Okay. The first time we spoke about the Sharpen, I believe was after cross-examination.
And in that conversation, did she tell you that she was not really able to have a conversation with Ms. Charney, correct?
There were different things.
Okay.
Okay. She told me different things.
Right. The first time you were talking to her, it was contemporaneous to when her husband was in trouble, correct? And-
When I did the piece on her right after he was indicted,
Yes.
I don't think the name Kathy Durst even came up.
Okay, not Kathy Durst, Ms.
Or
Charney.
the sheriff.
When did you have your first conversation with her about Deborah Charney?
It would have to be after I found out about Deborah Sharp. You know, that there was this woman who had married shortly before Susan was killed.
And when you had that first conversation, was she able to, did she tell you that she couldn't really have a conversation with Ms. Charney, that she was shut down?
As I just said, she told me various things. Once that she was shut down, once that she didn't in fact talk to her.
Right.
Once that there were inconsistent answers. There were inconsistent answers to the question whether she had a conversation with her.
When she told you she did have an interaction that was extensive or detailed, that was in pursuit of the book you were working on, correct?
In pursuit of,
Pursuit, to include it in the book.
to include, it was, yes, she wished to include that in the book.
Right, but you told her, you can't include that, because don't you remember, I interviewed you previously, and you said none of that happened, correct?
Thank you.
Yes?
Correct. Thanks for refreshing me on that, the time to do the sequence.
So she basically wanted to use a concocted story to sell her book, correct?
No argument there.
Court's indulgence, please.
Yes.
Who was Paul Coulter?
He's one of the detectives that was originally on the case.
Along with Jerry Stevens?
Yes.
Okay. And please tell us when you believe it was first reported in Variety that Susan had passed with murder.
And I was trying to figure that out, whether it was the January 2nd, 3rd, 4th. It was after the New Year.
It was after the New Year, though, correct?
Yeah. In other words, she was dead for a good week before anybody knew.
So, okay, thank you.
I wish I could find that.
When you wrote these articles about Mr. Durst, you got paid, didn't you? Well, maybe not.
Not as well as you are being paid, but yes,
Why are they all jealous, you know? But you got paid, right? That's why you do, I mean, it's your occupation, right?
Yeah.
Some people are cooks, some people are
Yeah.
prosecutors, you choose to be a journalist, correct?
Bad decision, but yeah.
And then when you decided to partner up with Miss Pirro, that was for a slightly bigger payday, wasn't it?
No,
Really, you were getting paid more money for your magazine articles than the...
not per article compared to per, but my magazine articles, maybe they take a month, maybe they take 3 months. In other words, I would make, it wasn't a bigger payday, so.
Okay, but you were hoping to get a payday working on a project that involved Mr. Durst, correct?
Yes,
And of course, would it be a fair statement to say that crime stories sell?
I think they do.
Your Honor, along the lines of the source issue, just to perfect the record, I have a couple of quick questions.
You may.
You claim that there was a statement that Susan was upset when Bobby changed his phone number. You remember that?
Yes, that was what my report
And,
said.
and you had sources for that. Can you tell us who the source for that was?
No, sir,
And based on the same
correct.
privilege? Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further.
Okay, redirect. Okay. May the witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
You are now excused. Thank you very much.
Good luck with this.
All right, exhibits?
Mark is People's 262B, the exhibit sheet that goes along with the testimony of Lisa Paulo. Exhibit sheet is 1 page. To mark is People's 262C. It's a 2-page transcript, which was People's 109 in the video. People's 262D, it's a 5-page transcript. That was People's 110 in the video. And People's 262E, which is a 3-page transcript, which was People's 111 in the video.
All right, Mr. Newman?
People call FBI Special Agent Eric Perry, Your Honor.
Yes. Yeah.
Please remain standing, raise your right hand and be sworn. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name.
My first name is Eric. My last name is Perry. Eric is spelled E-R-I-C. Perry is spelled P-E-R-R-Y.
Thank you, sir.
You may
Special Agent
proceed.
Perry, you have a microphone in front of you, so if you can, your voice is pretty loud, but if you can speak into it, that will be helpful. Also, for the jurors, if anybody does not hear me because I'm pretty far away, is everyone hearing me right now? I'm going to try to keep my voice up. May I begin, Your Honor?
Yes.
Special Agent Perry, what do you do for a living?
I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
And can you tell us a little bit about your background and training?
To date, I have approximately 26 years in law enforcement. I started out as a law enforcement ranger for the National Park Service. Then I was actually a Colorado State Patrol trooper as well as an investigator, and then I joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation, where I've been with them for almost 12 years now as a special agent. And
oh, go ahead.
I've attended, the Law Enforcement Academy for the Park Service. I've attended the Colorado State Patrol Academy. I graduated there in 1998. Graduated the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia in 2004, and been receiving pretty much continuing education on an annual basis throughout my employment as well.
What is your current assignment within the FBI?
So right now, since 2013, I've been assigned to our cellular analysis survey team. It goes by the acronym CAST, C-A-S-T. We've received, to date, I've probably received about 1,000 hours in locating of devices through like cell phone records, social media apps and stuff. And we provide routine assistance to state, local, federal departments where there's electronic devices involved.
And currently, where are you assigned?
I'm currently fall under our criminal investigative division, which is the FBI is known for its acronyms. It's CID, out of Washington, D.C. However, I sit in the Tacoma, Washington field office, and I cover the Pacific Northwest up into Alaska.
And when I say the name Robert Durst, is that a name you're familiar with?
Yes, I am.
And can you explain how you became involved in Mr. Durst's case?
Towards the end of April 2012 into the beginning of May of 2012, I was assigned as an agent in New York City, the New York City field office. We received a complaint from an individual named Ed Carr.
Can you spell that, please?
It's going to be Ed, E-D, and the last name I'm pretty sure is spelled K-A-H-R-E-R. Now, Ed Carr was a former FBI supervisor, retired, and he was actually the director of security for the Durst.
Could we have a sidebar?
Yeah. Let's step aside, just pause for a moment. All right, so this is the limited purpose, though.
Yes, Your Honor.
So this is to explain why the agent was investigating, not necessarily for the truth of the reasons he was investigating. It just began as investigation. So you may continue.
So you were saying that you were approached by Ed Carr, who was a former head of an office of the FBI, and Mr. Rourke stated to you what?
Mr. Carr had...
Not Rourke, I'm sorry. I've got the, my apologies. Carr, excuse me.
Mr. Carr provided us some information about some concerns of the Durst family, of some alleged threats to the family members, and that they believe that Bob was a threat, responsible for those threats to the family members.
And when did this approximately occur?
The one, I believe, there's early on in April of 2012, there's an incident, I believe during the film, where he was outside of a Durst property in New York City, and that's kind of what raised their concerns.
So there's an interview that takes place, you're aware of, on April 18, 2012 with Jarecki and Smerling, is that correct?
I can't remember the exact date. I thought it was April 8th, but I may be mistaken in the date.
But you're referring to an interview that Jarecki and Smerling did with Bob Durst?
It was actually some filming. I believe Mr. Jarecki and Mr. Durst were outside of a Durst property in New York City doing filming. That's about what I know about that incident.
And that prompted this report?
Yes, that's prompted Mr. Carr to come to the FBI to advise us of the potential threat.
At this point in time, had you had any contact with Mr. Jarecki or Mr. Smerling?
None.
Can you tell me, what did you do as a result of your contact with Mr. Carr?
At that point, that was kind of the beginning stages of an in-depth, intense background investigation into Mr. Durst. I didn't know who Mr. Durst was at that time either, which prompted me to, obviously I first started out by watching All Good Things and kind of figure out who Mr. Jarecki was and Mr. Durst was. Based on that information, I then started to look into the case files for the relevant cases in which Mr. Durst was a person of interest. And that included working with the New York State Police with Detective Joe Becerra, or investigator, I think his title is. It included me reaching out to the Los Angeles Police Department's Robbery Homicide Division and speaking with Detective George Shamlin.
Let me stop you for a moment. I just want to be clear. You mentioned Jarecki and Smerling. I just want to be clear. When the FBI got involved, when the complaint came to you and you started your investigation, had you had any contact with Mr. Jarecki or Mr. Smerling?
None. The first contact, as I'll talk, I believe, was in actually late November, and the first in-person meeting would have been December 7th of 2012.
So, Special Agent Perry, if the allegation were made that the FBI opened an investigation because of Andrew Jarecki and Mark Smerling, would that be an accurate allegation?
That's 100% false. We opened it up on the threat that, based on the information that Mr. Carr provided to us at the time.
So you indicated you ended up speaking to Joe Becerra, and you also spoke to individuals working with Mr. Becerra, Detective Becerra from the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell me, when was your first contact with LAPD?
I first reached out to LAPD and spoke with Detective Shamlin. It would have been in August of 2012. And that was for the purpose of determining who was the case detective for the Susan Berman file.
And at that time, were you actually able to speak to Detective Shamlin and to get preliminary information?
Yes. He actually advised me that he will refresh. He was going to pull the file, go over the file, learn the facts of the files. I believe it was newly transferred to him. So he wanted an opportunity to learn, go over the facts of the case as they had it in their file.
When you talked to Detective Shamlin, based on your conversations with him at the time you first spoke to him, was there an active investigation going on with LAPD regarding the Susan Berman case?
I don't think it was an active file at the time. I believe it, again, I don't want to speak for LAPD and what the status of their investigation was at that time. There's probably better people to do that, but I don't believe it was an active investigation at that time. I don't know if it would be considered a cold case at that time.
Pursuant to your discussions with Detective Shamlin, did you end up traveling out to strike that? At some point in time, did you end up making contact, or were you contacted by Andrew Jarecki and Mark Smerling?
Actually, I was contacted by Mark Smerling, not Jarecki, just Mark Smerling.
Do you remember approximately when this was?
My recollection is the phone call. He actually, what we call as a cold call, he called me at my office. I want to say it was late November. I was sitting at my office in New York City when I got the phone call.
Had there been any publication at that point of your threat investigation involving Douglas Durst?
No, not at all. There was, the only thing that happened prior to anything was I think Matt Birkbeck made a tweet on his blog or something just saying something about referencing the FBI looking into Bob Durst. That was, as far as my knowledge, that was the only thing that was out there in public.
And can you spell Birkbeck's last name, please?
I want to say, it's by memory here, but it's going to be Birkbeerk. Matthew's his first name.
And Matt Birkbeck, can you tell me who he is?
I believe he's just a kind of an independent blogger, journalist that has written articles about Bob in the past. I don't know how many, but that's my knowledge of Mr. Birkbeck.
So as a result of that, you end up getting a call from Mark Smerling. And what does Mr. Smerling ask, if anything, for you to do?
I don't know if that was the reason why Mark called me. Mark just cold called me, and I believe he stated to the fact, just paraphrasing, but rumor has it that you're looking into Mr. Durst. And obviously my response to him was, well, I can't confirm nor deny any investigation that the FBI has into Mr. Durst at all. At that point, he advised me that would it help to know that they had 30 to 40 hours of audio and video tape of Mr. Durst. Obviously, that was, piqued our interest. And we actually, we later asked to set up a meeting with Mr. Smerling and Mr. Jarecki to kind of get to know them, kind of get to know their intentions, and just get, to see if there's anything that we could gain from the video, the audio and video.
At the time, did you also bring in a U.S. attorney with respect to setting up an agreement so that you could potentially view the materials that they had.
Yes, we had an assistant U.S. attorney by the name of Russell Capone out of the Southern District of New York had been assisting us, and he was brought into the investigation to kind of help make sure that everything was, any communication between Smerling and Durecki was handled appropriately with the bounds of the law.
And at the same time, do you also do you travel to Los Angeles to discuss the case with experts out here, including Detective Shamlian?
Yes, I believe it was right approximately on or about November 28th of 2012. I traveled out to L.A., and along with my fellow FBI agent, Jeff Cunho.
Can you spell that?
Sorry?
Spell Cunho for the court reporter, please.
Cunho is going to be C-U-G-N-O. Jeffrey will be common spelling. So Agent Cunho and I went over to the Robbery Homicide Division. We met with Investigator Shamlin, and we actually were able to get a copy of the what they call the murder books or the case file on the Susan Berman case. And then we proceeded to review that for several hours.
At this point in time, had you had any contact or any meetings with anybody from the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office?
No, we did not.
Did you return to California later on in December and have another meeting?
Yes, we did. Based on the previous meeting, we realized that there wasn't enough time to go over everything we wanted to know. So we flew back out, or I flew back out. I want to say it's December 19th and 20th. Again, Agent Cunho and I met with Detective Shamlin, as well as the former detective of the case, Paul Coulter.
And in early January, did you have a follow-up meeting in New York with Eddie Murphy from the Westchester County District Attorney's Office and Joe Becerra from the New York State Police?
Yes, I believe in early January, Investigator Becerra and Investigator Murphy and I all met at the FBI office in Lower Manhattan to discuss the case file.
At some point in time, were you provided with my contact information?
Yes, I was.
And can you explain how that occurred?
Agent Cunho is based here in the Los Angeles field office, and he had a prior relationship with Mr. Lewin on previous cases, and advised that Mr. Lewin would be an excellent candidate to bring this case to, and to pitch the case to see if there's anything here that would be prosecutable.
Did you also discuss with Detective Shamlian potentially contacting myself or someone else at the District Attorney's Office?
Yes, since this was a LAPD case, they have and always have been the lead investigative agency. So Mr. Shamlin was part of the discussion to reach out to Mr. Lewin.
And at a certain point in time, did you actually make contact with myself and Detective Shamlian together?
Yes, I did. I believe it was on a phone call in the middle part of January.
In late January, did you and New York State Police Detective Becerra, did you interview Douglas Durst in New York City?
Yes, we did. That was at the Durst organization in Midtown New York.
And on February 17th of 2013, did you participate in a phone call that involved myself and Mark Smerling and Andrew Jarecki?
Yes.
And during that conversation, do you recall whether or not Jarecki and Smerling tried to bring up any of the Ed Wright material? What was that?
And it also calls for hearsay.
Oh, thanks.
So it's preliminary, so I'll allow the leading question. It does not itself call for hearsay. Overruled.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Sure. During that conversation, did Jarecki and Smerling attempt to bring up information they had from a private investigator who had worked for Bob Durst's attorney, private investigator Ed Wright, who'd worked for Bob Durst's original attorney in 1982?
Yes, that's I believe the first time I heard that name.
And do you recall at the time that they brought that up, what were they told?
They were clearly, sorry.
Sustained?
What was that?
Sustained? Hearsay sustained?
Not for the truth of the matter, Your Honor.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to give me a different purpose, a sidebar.
Okay.
Actually, why don't we take our break? I think we can do it right here. So, ladies and gentlemen, do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. We'll come back at, let's make this 10:45. 10:45. The question called for hearsay. You're telling me, Mr. Lewin, that there's a non-hearsay purpose.
Yes.
What do you intend to elicit?
Yeah, this is the offer of proof, Your Honor. Special Agent Perry would be testifying to the following: that during the call, Jarecki and Smerling brought up the Ed Wright material, which I believe to be privileged. That they were told immediately, do not discuss any of that information. They were also told during the call, they said that they would agree to show us the interviews with Mr. Durst. And most important, they were advised by me on the call that I would review any evidence that they chose to show us, but that it was absolutely a one-way street. That's the language that was used. We would not be sharing any information with them, that it would only go one way, and that we could not control what they did, but they needed to understand they're not working with us, they're not our agents, etc. All of that, the non-hearsay purpose of this goes to explain, again, the nature of the relationship between Jarecki and Smerling and law enforcement. Although the court has previously made a determination legally that they were not agents of law enforcement, the defense has, in their opening statement, and repeatedly throughout the pendency of the case, has made the allegation that in essence, Jarecki and Smerling were working for the police. They've also, at times, either directly stated or implied that somehow my conduct was unethical or unprofessional, and it's very clear that they were told specifically, and that was the guidance that was given, that it was going to be a one-way street, and that's what it remained. That's the extent of it. So there's no statement that's being admitted for the truth of the matter asserted.
Mr. DeGuerin?
Well, first, I recognize that Mr. Lewin's hot button is to say anything about ethics. I'm not accusing him of bad ethics at all, and I want to make that clear. And I'm glad and I understand why he said he couldn't use Ed Wright material. But that's not relevant to this jury, nor is it relevant to this jury. These meetings in which Smerling and Jarecki and the FBI agent and Mr. Lewin discussed what they were going to do. That we have not and do not say that the genesis of this investigation was the FBI. So that's a false impression. We're not, that's a false impression that he's trying to correct, and we haven't tried to make that impression.
So let me inquire.
The relevance.
Yeah, so the relevance of the Wright material, if it's never going to be an issue and you can't refer to it, the mere fact you turned it down to show how ethical you are, I think that's a bit much. The rest of it I understand though.
Well, Your Honor, if the court's position is,
I don't take positions.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I forgot the court. The word position is not a word.
Yeah, I don't take positions.
The court likes. If that's the court's ruling, Your Honor, then we'll stay away from the Ed Wright material. The importance is the rest of it.
Yes, overruled as to that. Now, in Chambers, there was an objection to reference to the Douglas Durst threat as being the source. I did not see that in any way as prejudicial. It wasn't admitted for the truth. I indicated I would overrule the objection, so I obviously did sub silencio.
You also gave,
Well, Your Honor.
you also gave an instruction.
Yes, I did limit, gave a limiting instruction, which I think was appropriate given your objection. Mr. DeGuerin?
Well, this idea about a threat to Douglas in 2012 is also a false assumption.
Well, it's not admitted for the truth. They looked into it, whether it's true or not. They didn't make a lot out of it. They just said they were in front of his property. They thought it was a threat, so they looked into it, and the more they looked, the more they wanted to look. So
Well,
I don't think there's any prejudice to
The
that.
court may not be aware, but there was a trial in New York in which Mr. Durst was found not guilty about either trespass or violating the stay-away order.
From Douglas Durst.
Yes.
Interesting. Now, thank you. Now, as far as the limiting instruction that I proposed about Lisa DePaulo's testimony, I'm not going to do that. I'll tell you why. I didn't really like all of that transcript because the section in particular about Terry Chavin contained some speculative and unreliable comments, but they're interspersed with prior statements that were admissible and very probative. And though I might have edited it differently, there's nothing prejudicial, truly prejudicial about that material. Parsing it to develop an appropriate limiting instruction, I think was unworkable, particularly given the stipulations number 45 and 50. There will not be any limiting instruction. I just didn't want to leave that dangling.
Thank you for putting that on the record.
Then the one other point I wanted to talk with you about is that because of our schedule change, because the juror was not available yesterday, we are doing much more of a day, a full court day on Thursday. Next Monday is a day when I promised the defense that they would have that day to work, and they can, and I understand you want to work here, not at the jail, right? You want to work with him here after, but we do have some business. We will go over jury instructions a little bit in the morning before you, I can just order Mr. Durst in for your convenience, but we do need him here for the purpose of going over those jury instructions. So it'll be dark on that Monday. Question.
But we will be here.
You'll be here.
And
And
he'll be here.
And you want us here then on Monday as well?
I want you here in the morning so that we
Okay.
can talk about those instructions.
We'll be here.
Then the other issue is, we've been talking about whether we would work on any Friday, and I just told the jurors about August 27th, they'd certainly be in deliberations, but it reminds me that's when juror number 12 would probably be absent again, because each month on the Thursday, right, she leaves early because she travels. So I think that may be an issue, that August 27. So keeping that in mind, and our goal I think is to keep jurors, that's one of the goals. But let's talk about the 20th we could be in session. And that's okay with you, but I know that let's talk about the 6th. I have something I have a swearing someone in the afternoon, a new commissioner, but the morning of August 6th I could be available. I do have some cases on the 13th, but I could be available most of that day. So are those days a problem for anyone else, for the defense?
We would request to be in session on those days. We'll be there as long as
Right, but I haven't talked, I know you, that's clear, I haven't talked with the defense lawyers about that part. Is that,
You let us.
Yeah, I don't like the 20th for personal reasons.
okay?
Which day?
20th,
Sixth.
Friday the 20th.
But also 6th and 13th could be helpful. The other issue is we do have just one alternate we do have 6 alternates. We have an alternate who's asked for the 19th off. I mean, that is a day we could reclaim. Again, I don't want to lose any of these jurors. If we had to lose a juror, losing an alternate is plausible. If we can recapture those Fridays, that reduces my need to do such a thing. So I just think about it. I wanted to broach that subject with you, those subjects with you. Okay?
You know, we had the last issue on the instruction regarding the invocation of the reporter's shield.
Yeah, so there's a CalCrim. I'd already utilized that on the privilege by Stuart Altman, who I think he did exercise a privilege. I'm not sure that was edited out, but he claimed it on the record. He was entitled to. Lisa DePaulo is entitled to, but Jarecki and Smerling are in a stipulation exercising a privilege, so I could try to reconcile that. We'll all talk about that. That's one of the things we discuss when we discuss instructions.
Thanks,
It's definitely on the table, okay?
Do we have a few minutes, Ron?
Pardon?
Do we have a few
You do, yes.
Thanks.
Yes, recess.